Hello, my name is Ben. In today's video, I'd like to talk to you about something called TV contrast ratio. Contrast ratio measures the difference between the brightest of whites and the darkest of blacks that a TV can produce. A higher contrast ratio will show you a much better and sharper picture in the darkest areas on a television. When shopping for a TV, contrast ratio numbers that you may find may range from 3,000 to 1 to 1 million to 1. Now, one may think all you need to do is simply compare the different contrast ratio specs between the different TVs and simply buy the one with the highest contrast ratio. But actually, there are two things you need to keep in mind when comparing these numbers. First, you'll find that some TVs list two different types of contrast ratio: static contrast ratio and dynamic contrast ratio. Static contrast ratio shows the difference between the darkest of darkests and the brightest of whites that a TV can produce at the same time. Whereas dynamic contrast ratio will measure the same differences as static contrast ratio, except it will do it over a period of time. So the number for dynamic will usually be a lot larger than the static contrast ratio. So keep in mind when comparing static and dynamic contrast ratio, especially between different models, that you're comparing the same contrast ratio, static with static and dynamic with dynamic. Secondly, there is no industry standard for measuring either type of contrast ratio. So just keep in mind when you're going to be comparing contrast ratio between different TVs that the different TVs are of the same brand. In conclusion, contrast ratio is one important factor when choosing an HD TV, but shouldn't be used for sole judgment. For more information, please feel free to contact our expert Adorama sales staff at 1-800-223-2500.